Hi, I'm Pamela, not Pea Bizzle or Sweet Pea, and you're watching Made In. Gardens have thoroughly evolved over time for practical reasons such as survival, the environment, right through to spiritual havens. Now whether dry, edible, landscape, flower, wet or wildlife, filled with sycamore, grey willows, figs, plums, roses, bachelor buttons or pomegranate trees, the way we humans interact with the earth will continue until the end of time.
What are gardens for?
Retirement, retirement, retirement.
It's for very old mythical people.
It means peace, being close to nature.
It means I can eat a microbiotic diet.
They're small, messy and full of cats.
My name is Brent Elliott. I'm the historian for the Royal Horticultural Society. I was formerly the Society's librarian for 25 years. Garden history is more difficult, particularly when you are looking at ancient times, than, say, architectural history, because the evidences of gardens are short-lived and they don't survive well.
My name is George Plumtree. I'm Chief Executive of the National Garden Scheme, but I've also been a long-standing author and journalist about gardens and their history and design. I think the important thing is most people recognise that gardens originated from certain countries in the Middle Eastern areas, in Egypt, what was Mesopotamia, Egypt, and so that tradition is one of the most important. And of course English gardens, when they started, would have originated from European traditions, probably mainly from Italy, so it was quite different, and it wasn't until probably the 15th or 16th centuries that the two met up.
The Ottoman garden had a tremendous impact on Europe in the 16th century. Once the city that had formerly been Constantinople was conquered and became Istanbul, European countries had to establish trade relations with it. And ambassadors to Istanbul came back with reports of the gardens there, and in particular the garden plants. And during the course of the 1500s, many now familiar gardening plants were introduced into Europe from Istanbul, primarily via Vienna. And these included most famously tulips, which became a subject of enormous enthusiasm and changed hands for immense sums of money. The modern European flower garden really developed in the 1500s and 1600s as a direct result of plants coming from Turkey.
Most garden traditions originated from areas of Central Asia, so around things like the legend of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which probably dated from about I think about 600 BC, and that was a great sort of ideal for garden makers. And of course the Garden of Eden was always meant to have been sited in or around what was Mesopotamia, and that tradition spread to create some incredibly important gardens which have remained big examples, like the gardens particularly in Iran, gardens in Mughal India, which you can still see today at places like Agra, and all created by the Mughal emperors mainly in the 16th and 17th centuries.
By the middle of the 20th century, garden historians in Europe and America thought they had a very confident and settled idea of the history and origins of the Islamic garden and what it meant. It was a representation of paradise. The prototype was the Garden of Eden, which had 4 rivers running through it. So the Islamic garden was based on things divided into 4s and with streams in them. And of course, the advantages of that for water and shade were also readily apparent. The Western idea of the Islamic garden is in the course of changing at the moment. My generation were brought up to think of the Islamic garden as a representation of paradise. I still find that a very comfortable way of looking at Islamic gardens, but I just have to keep telling myself it might not be true.
I think they were both for decoration, for relaxation, and also for practical reasons. I think Islamic gardens, as we refer to them, the gardens which originated in areas of the Middle East and Asia were very much for relaxation and for pleasure. Probably a lot of early European gardens were more for productivity, for growing things to eat.
Gardens have developed in terms of style, in terms of technology, and in terms of planting. Garden tools go back to ancient times, long before any documentation about people inventing them. In fairly recent times, the arrival of new materials for making garden tools and the arrival of electric power for garden tools have changed the ranges of tools available to us. But for centuries, rakes, brooms, spades, forks, etc. have been the mainstay of gardening. They've changed their shape. The earliest spades were small things operated by a man leaning on them. Spades with long handles that you could just operate with your feet took a long time to emerge, but the basic pattern of garden tools has remained the same, and real change in garden tools has been a fairly recent matter.
Mainly evolved over time because of improvements in things like architecture, building, mechanisation. In the old days, people used to crop their grass by putting flocks of sheep on them. Now they do it with a lawnmower. But I think what people want to get out of gardens probably hasn't changed that much in many, many centuries. I think that's a figure which shows that year on year, gardens for English people are extremely important, both as extensions of their home, so they spend a lot of money on them for that reason, and also because they are, as a population, extremely enthusiastic and devoted gardeners, so they spend a lot on the gardening side as well.
Much more of English domestic life nowadays takes place in the garden than it did a century ago. So this naturally leads to a greater amount of money being spent on furnishing and decorating the garden.
The simplest garden would be all hard surface with a few plants in containers.
I suppose the lawn is one of the easiest to maintain because all most people have to do is mow it regularly, perhaps fertilize it once a year, etc.
I've always been interested in gardens since my childhood, and I joined the NGS a few years ago to put my knowledge of gardens and business to good use for a charity.
I came to Britain in the 1970s, ready to look at the architecture of the 19th century, where it survived with enthusiasm, and I eventually discovered that I had no idea what a 19th century garden was supposed to look like. So I looked at the standard histories of gardening, and they either stopped before they got to the 19th century, or they jumped over it as fast as they could, regarding it as the period of the nadir of bad taste. So there was nothing for it but to go back to the original documentation of the period. And when I completed my doctorate and didn't get any of the positions for which I was shortlisted, I decided that I now wanted to get a job where I could devote myself, at least in part, to researching the history of 19th century gardens. So here I am at the Royal Horticultural Society, and one thing has led to another.
Probably I used to write weekly gardening tips when I was the garden correspondent for the Times newspaper, and I think one of the ones I always enjoyed most was I got endless letters from readers about what to do with slugs, and the most easiest way to get rid of them is to put out a saucer with beer in it. Slugs love beer, and once they're in, they can't get out.
Well, the older gardening literature is full of bizarre gardening tips. One is for how to keep birds out of your garden. You put a collar on a cat, run a leash from that collar to an overhead wire, then the cat can run up and down chasing the birds away but can't actually get out of the garden.
A gardening tip? Yes, get a flat.
Yeah, what's a really good idea is to get a ripe tomato and a banana, a brown paper bag to speed up the ripening process. Brilliant.
I think gardens are for eating.
Garden is something that's created by God, and it's lovely. I have a garden at home, and I try my best to make it beautiful, especially when it's beautiful and you see the sun come out and the butterfly flying around. It's just fantastic. I love it.
Gardens are for chilling. I haven't got one, but I love to have one, just to spend time when it's nice weather.
It's good for the dogs. I got children, so it's good for the children.
Entertainment.
Decoration.
And to keep animals safe, because animals are getting extinct, like frogs and common garden animals.
Growing life.
Recreation.
have a good time.
Can you describe your garden in 3 words?
Flowers.
Absolutely ravishingly beautiful.
Beautiful.
It's got grass.
Grass.
Colors.
It's got terrace.
Very amazingly green.
And dirt.
And it's got lots of trees, so it's very private.
My garden? Unfortunately, I don't have one.
Fantastic.
Not old people, children. As you mentioned, old people, yes, as well.
Yeah?
No, I don't think it's for everyone.
They're great. They're great for everyone, I believe.
No.
No, I think they're for
I go in my
everyone.
garden all the time. Whenever it's a beautiful summer day like
Just
today.
sunbathe and go on a trampoline and
Yeah.
you have fun. It's a place for
You
everyone.
have to enjoy it.
Enjoy it.
You will.
Even my little girl, she's 4 years old and she likes garden. So it's for anybody, doesn't matter the age.
No, for everyone.
Can you give us a gardening tip? Keep your garden safe and make sure you
You cut the grass and the bushes to equal lengths. You don't want it really odd. And keep your animals safe. Build homes for the animals because animals is very important.
Rake the leaves and pick up the dog poo.
I have no green fingers, I'm sorry.
Keep it clean.
Look after it.
A new diet alert, freshly picked from your flower bed.
Esa muralla frente a mi frente la he construido, te lo digo, por no estar pendiente y sin salida. Yo me creí esa muralla que llorando tras ella caí.
Humans' relationship with plants is almost as old as humans as a species. The majority of our knowledge about the methods and means of gardens in the Middle Ages comes through surviving textual documentation and surviving artworks, such as paintings and tapestry. Ever wondered how we even got around to gardening? Why do we do it for the beauty and some for the nourishment? And what trends have occurred in gardening that changed over the years? We begin with long ago ancient times. Well, the earliest gardens were grown for practical reasons. People grew herbs or vegetables. However, when man became civilized, an upper class emerged with the leisure to enjoy purely decorative gardens. And rather than get one's hands dirty, they employed servants, modern-day gardeners, to pull the weeds for them. In the hot and arid climate of ancient Egypt, people of the affluent kind liked to rest in the shades of trees. Thus the birth of gardens enclosed by walls with trees planted in rows, the likes of sycamores, date palms, fig, nut and pomegranate trees, and of course the ever cheerful willows. Now flowers were also a big feature in Egyptian gardens. Roses, poppies, irises, daisies and cornflowers, also known as bachelor buttons. In about 8000 BC, in the Fertile Crescent of the Near and Middle East, present-day Syria, Iran, Iraq, turkey and Jordan wheats, barley, lentil, pea, bitter fetch, chickpea and possibly faba bean were brought into cultivation by the Neolithic people. These crops spread from the point of origin. Archaeological evidence indicates that the wheats and some of the legumes had reached Greece by 6000 BC, and evidence of their presence within that millennium has been found in the Danube Basin, the Nile Valley and the Indian subcontinent, Pakistan. Dispersal continued throughout Europe, the crops reaching Britain and Scandinavia in about 4000–2000 BC. I'm not anti-Hellenist or Romanist, but why hasn't anyone written a book about Greek or Roman gardens? Would make this section so much easier to explain. Anyway, the Greeks were not great gardeners. Please note, Aristotle did have his own botanical garden and wrote 26 treatises on natural science. And apparently after conquering Britain, the Romans brought back some new, exciting findings, such as roses, leeks, turnips and plums. Yummy! The Hanging Gardens of Babylon never actually had any hanging baskets, and if it was still with us today, would probably be the second oldest ancient wonder of the world. But no one is actually sure if it ever existed. Built in the 6th century, some scholars believe there's no record of it, because they were gardens, living things filled with trees and plants that eventually die. The most popular theory whizzing around is that the gardens were built by King Nebuchadnezzar, by slaves and peasants, to make his wife happy. She was homesick for the plants and gardens of her homeland. Nice story. There is no documentation in Babylonian sources that the gardens ever existed. There is also no solid archaeological evidence that they existed. 25 hours from Babylon, we enter Istanbul. From the 17th to the 19th century, some of the world's most renowned gardens were created by the Ottomans in Turkey. The Ottoman gardens originated from the general framework of Islamic gardens, when the Turks reached Turkey via Iran and gathered knowledge of Persian gardens along the way. The Ottoman Turks made palace gardens in Bursa, Erdene and Istanbul. So we've had botanical, edible, dry and flower gardens. Now for some British gardens. If you didn't have sheep or a skilled scytheman, then your garden would always look like this. Until this man, Edwin Beard Budding, invented this baby. Now we're up to the 20th century, where gardening became a popular hobby, helped partly by the celebrity gardeners, including Percy Thrower, Alan Titchmarsh, Monty Don, and my favourite, Charlie Dimmock. Overall, whatever claims of yesteryear, who would have thought it? Gardens would have the capability of offering us its haven, and like nature, never static, constantly changing, not only with weather and season, but also with the vagaries of human tastes and fashions, from age to age and place to place. Now, thanks for watching. And if you believe something has been unfairly claimed, then get your comments in, or just add your frustration to our Facebook page. But now you're free. You're free to do something thoroughly worthwhile with your time and plant a seed. Ta-ra!
We could be here hours and I can have more things to say about it.